Everyone has nightmares. But for actors, they can take a very different form because their worst nightmares happen when they are wide awake.
And I fly off the ramp and into the lap of a patron in the front row.
All the lines went out of my head.
You're missing your entrance.
And I cold cock him in the jaw.
And I feel something crawl into my ear canal and go inside.
He takes the chicken costume head off and makes his toupee stand straight up on his head.
What I've been saying in Vietnamese translates to my hurts when I don't look at you.
I'm Louanne Moldovan, host of The Actor's Nightmare. Join us each week for real horror stories from the stage, told by the actors who actually lived through them. Sometimes terrifying, sometimes hard to believe, often very funny. And every actor who has been around long enough has at least one nightmare story from the stage that made them think, it's time to get a real job. Hi, I'm Louanne Moldovan, and welcome to The Actor's Nightmare. We have a great story today, but before we get into it, I want to thank our sponsors who have been so supportive of the show. First, a big shout out to Artists Repertory Theater, Portland's premier regional theater company, producing intimate, provocative shows that provide a home for a diverse community of artists where they can thrive and take risks. Check out their 2019-2020 season at www.artistrep.org. Also, thanks so much to our patrons, Bob Conklin, and to Len and Susan Magazine and their company Real Estats, providing statistical overviews for residential real estate in Oregon and Washington. Check them out at www.realestats.net. And of course, we are so grateful for the studio at North Rim, where we record our podcast. If you want to do a show, check them out at studioatnorthrim.com. All right, so today we have in the studio Adam Klugman.
Hi, Louanne.
Hi, Adam. Now, you grew up with not one, but two famous parents.
Well, yes, my mother used to say that she was a semi-name. My father was
a whole name.
Was a whole name, yes. He was Jack Klugman was my father. Quincy, The Odd Couple. He was the messy guy.
I mean, I remember that. And also, he came from the stage.
My father was a stage actor,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yes.
Right. That was his first love. That's where he discovered acting, and that was what he went back to at the end.
And he won awards.
He won 3 Emmys.
Wow.
And,
yeah.
People's Choice Award.
Right.
He won an English Tony when he did The Odd Couple. So he originated The Odd Couple in England.
Oh,
so he
okay.
took over for Walter Matthau on the stage and then took it to England.
What was that like because Walter Matthau made the movie? Did that bum your dad out?
No, because Walter Matthau was a big star. My dad wasn't.
Okay.
Walter Matthau was getting paid the equivalent of $45,000 a week to do The Odd Couple when it opened.
Uh-huh.
And my dad said, how much is Walter making? It was $5,500. My dad said, well, I want half that. He came back and said, we'll give you $1,500. My dad said, I'll take it. And thank God he did.
And he did Twilight Zone.
My dad did Twilight Zones. He was a TV guy he made his bones in TV. He did Playhouse 90s. I mean,
right.
Like all that old school stuff.
Wow. So what was that like for you?
When people ask what my childhood was like, I had 2 big personalities. My mother was Brett Summers, who was on a show called Match Game.
Right.
So she was the crazy lady in the middle with the big glasses.
And also an actress, though.
Also an actress, but more of a personality.
Okay.
Cocktail party guest should have been on her business card. Like, the best cocktail party guest ever. So that job was perfect for her.
Yeah.
So I say to people that my childhood was a lot like a Japanese monster movie, right? You know, like wings flapping, fire, smoke rings, cities falling. I mean, just giant personalities. And it was really nothing that about $100,000 worth of therapy didn't fix.
Oh my gosh.
So it was, but my parents they weren't the greatest parents in the world, but they were really cool people. I mean, it was the era of the 70s, and everybody was into themselves. So it was like, you're good? You're everybody good?
Right.
Everybody was behaving badly. So the kids were behaving badly, the adults were behaving badly, so there were no adults in the room. And so it was, and I was Los Angeles in the 70s during my adolescence.
But did you think, I want to stay away from this industry?
I was a bit of a train wreck by the time I was 17 and started thinking about going to college, right? I mean, acting was the only thing I had any talent for.
Okay.
But, if your dad was a blacksmith, You know, if your parents were farmers, you'd know how to farm.
Yeah.
So I just grew up in that. So I tried it, and it wasn't for me.
But that leads us to the story you're here to tell us
You're
today,
right.
which is about your father and a chicken costume and
Yes.
how you fit into all that. Adam, tell us.
My father in a chicken costume. So my dad loved this play Tribute. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Bernard
Robbie
Slade?
Benson did it as a movie with Jack Lemmon.
Isn't it Bernard Slade?
It's
wrote
Bernard
that?
Slade.
Okay.
And
So
it's
you
Bernard
were-
Slade revenge on his drippy son from college, right? I mean, the part is, it's this charming father. He plays the piano and he flirts with young girls and the audience loves him. And then in walks his drippy son from college. You cannot be good in this part, okay? And it's kind of the end of my acting trajectory. And my dad says, let's do Tribute. We'll do Tribute. I love my dad. I really enjoyed being with him. I thought, well, we'll do Tribute. And we end up doing it at the Lawrence Welk Village Theater in Escondido, California. There's literally like cardboard cutouts of Lawrence Welk. Like, people put their arm around and look at these. I mean, and blue hairs, orange hairs, green hairs. This is old ladies. Okay. There are no small parts.
That's right. Or small theaters.
and
How big
no-
was the theater?
It was a big theater, you know,
Okay.
because it was like all the retirement people would come. So we were filling them in because they wanted to see my dad. It was kind of in his heyday. And it's 110 degrees in Escondido, California during the summer. And I get the worst summer cold. I don't know if you ever had a summer cold. But summer colds are like, it's like a balloon gets inflated in your head and then you walk out into the heat. It's just horrible. And my mother used to say to me, be careful about working with your father. And I don't know what she meant. She goes, just be careful. So I'm working with my dad, and we're working, and I'm killing it. Like, I'm way ahead of him all through the rehearsal period. And opening night, the reviewers are there. He just goes whizzing past me. His performance takes this quantum leap forward, and that was what my mother was trying to warn me about. Like, when it's showtime, he's Jack Klugman. And he's going to, when it's time to show up, you're going to be doing what you've been doing, and he's going to be doing something totally different.
He's got that audience feeding him.
It's just the
all
way he
that-
was wired.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at his ass as his performance is screaming, and I was struggling because this part is just, you can't be good in it. Nobody's going to like you. They are going to confuse your performance with the character, and they're going to hate you. And that is exactly what happens. The reviews come out, I get killed. I just get murdered. And my father? Love letters, of course, because that's all my father ever got his entire career were love letters. I mean, maybe he got one bad review in his entire career, and I never heard about it. But he always got love letters. Anyway, back to the chicken costume. The drippy son won't laugh, so the father puts on a chicken costume that's nostalgic for them that they used to play with when he was young. And every time my dad does the chicken costume, even when rehearsal, he goes, fucking chicken costume. I hate cheap shit, cheap jokes, and cheap laughs. I hate it. I'm like, well, it's a chicken costume. What's the big deal? And he just hates it. And I don't know why, but he just hates it. And every night we do it. We never get laughs. He's kind of blaming it on me, but he hates it. And every night he goes, that fucking chicken costume. I want to cut that scene from the play. I'm like, Dad, he can't cut the scene. So I find out why he hates it so much this one night. So he's got to come on stage with the chicken costume. We do our shtick. Then he takes the chicken costume hat off. We see that it's him, and then he drags the chicken costume off the stage. So this particular night, now what people didn't know about my dad is that he wore a toque. And he had one of the great toupes of all time. And my dad was a very salt-of-the-earth, down-to-earth guy, but the one place where he was vain was around his hair. Okay, so now you're starting to understand what he didn't like about the chicken costume. So he takes the chicken costume head off. And it's too bad this is just a podcast because you can't see the visual. It makes his toupee stand straight up on his head, okay? And the audience starts screaming. Okay? Absolutely howling. And he's looking at me like, we got it. Tonight we got it with a chicken costume. And he has no idea that his toupee's sticking up. And I'm kind of putting my hand on my head like, you might want to do, you might want to pat it down. And he's just loving it. And he's milking it now. He's doing the chicken costume. And I'm mortified. And he's clueless going, the chicken costume ready. So he takes off the chicken costume. He's literally walking around the stage
like
with
a cockatoo.
Yeah, like a cockatoo. And he drags the chicken costume off, and he's looking at me like, we finally killed it with the chicken costume. There's a stagehand there who's supposed to take the costume from him. So he's like, I'm going, so he's now realized what happened. So he goes off with this big grin, and he comes back on just stone-faced, furious at me. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. God. So like, this is not going to end well. So I get off stage, and at intermission, I run around to his dressing room, and I say, that was funny. My dad goes, it's not funny yet. And he kicks the door closed and goes, wham, and it slams in my face. So eventually he did find it funny, of course, because it's a funny story. But the first time I brought it up as kind of a reminiscence, I was a little bit wary because honestly, I didn't know if he was going to be able to laugh at it. But of course he did, and we had a good laugh. I mean, we didn't talk about it a lot, but we did finally, in the end, laugh about it together. You know, and that's the kind of the fun thing about my family was because we were a show business family that keeping a sense of humor about yourself was really important. So if we were living through something that was funny, that we knew was funny, but wasn't funny to us in the moment because it was too painful or too embarrassing, that's what we would say to each other, you know? Yeah, it's not funny yet. I literally remember getting sent to my room as a kid for not being able to keep a sense of humor about myself.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my mother was in the audience, too. And,
she
they
was?
were separated, and she loved it.
Of course she did. More further redemption for her.
She loved it.
Thank you for having the courage to share it here, and your therapist's office is waiting.
Thanks for having me, Louanne.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks so much for tuning into The Actor's Nightmare. We hope you enjoy listening to the podcast as much as we do producing it. If you have a story you'd like to share with The Actor's Nightmare, record it on the best gear you can find and send me an email to louanne@theactorsnightmare.com, Louanne. We'll be putting up a new podcast each week, so be sure to subscribe and support the show by liking us on Facebook. And again, I want to thank our sponsors, Artist Repertory Theater, Portland's premier regional theater company, producing intimate, provocative shows that provide a home for a diverse community of artists where they can thrive and take risks. And to Bob Conklin, an ardent sponsor of all things theatrical here in Portland. And finally, to Real Estats, providing statistical overviews for residential real estate in Oregon and Washington. This is Louanne Moldovan. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on The Actor's Nightmare.